Penelope sighed and sipped at her wine. She didn't tend to enjoy her family's big Christmas party. Her mother was loving and supportive for 90% of the year, but as soon as December hit, she always and without fail started pressuring Penelope to be more than she was, to be in a relationship or have a promotion or have something new in her life that Juliet could tell her Christmas party friends about. Of course, Penelope had nothing new to tell her mother, despite the fact that her elder brother and his husband had just adopted a new puppy into their family. Her younger brother had just started his first year at his top choice of university. Juliet still wanted her only daughter to be a prize to dangle in front of her so-called friends. Penelope was happy. Her mental health had got back on track after a difficult year. She had broken up with a short-term partner, or rather, she had been broken up with. There had been a lot of redundancies at her company, and it had been her job to tell them, not to mention her natural propensity towards perfectionism. However, none of these were things that her mother could boast about to her society friends. Penelope watched as her mother made the rounds, wondering if it was safe to venture out of her corner yet to look for food. She didn't want to fall into the trap again this year of drinking too much on an empty stomach, and the crab puffs were always so good. Penelope wondered if they were store-bought or caterer-made, and what lengths she would have to go to in order to have some at home for bad days. "Hey," a deep voice hissed, making Penelope jump. She looked up at Jason and scrunched her nose at him, disgruntled that he had made her slosh wine onto her hand. She quickly checked her black velvet dress, glad to find no staining. "You're such a crab puff," Jason offered, pulling a whole tray out from behind his back, cutting off whatever rude thing Penelope had been about to call him. She smiled. "How did you know?" Jason grinned, his bright white teeth shining in his naturally tanned face. "I'm here every year, remember?" he teased, as Penelope stuffed a crab puff into her mouth and moaned in pleasure. "And I, for one, do not want a repeat of last year, where you got completely trashed on wine and tried to pole dance on the staircase." "I could pole dance if I wanted to," Penelope stated around a mouthful of crab puff. "Sexy," Jason teased. Penelope flipped him off. Jason had been coming to these events as long as Penelope. His father was some important business contact or other. The first time he had appeared, he had been an 11-year-old scrawny brat in an ill-fitting suit with a nose too big for his face. He'd grown into himself a lot over the last 15 years or so, but never quite into that nose. Penelope, when she was a little too drunk for her own good, thought his nose quite endearing. He'd grown his hair out a little since the last year. It suited him much better, almost hiding his ice blue eyes. They weren't exactly friends, had never exactly been friends, thanks to the rivalry between Penelope's mother and Jason's father, but at events like these, it was people you could tolerate who were your greatest allies. Jason knew about Penelope's thing for crab puffs, and Penelope always knew which foods were dairy-free, keeping Jason from having a wonderful holiday visit to A&E. Juliet was the mayor and campaigning for better and more obvious dietary requirement info in schools and workplaces, and yet somehow never advertised what was dairy-free at her own parties. Penelope was pretty sure it was a slight against Jason's father. Juliet should have known better, that hurting Jason would have no effect on his father. But Juliet was petty, had always been petty, and Penelope knew it wasn't going to change any time soon. "So, what's your mother saying about you this year?" Jason asked as he snagged a bowl of crisps from a server. Fancy crisps, mind, but they were always dairy-free, since Juliet knew nobody would be able to remember which flavour was which when they got emptied into the silver platter bowls. "If you keep gathering silver serving platters, my corner of hiding is going to start looking like a magpie horde." "One for sorrow, two for joy," Jason fired back, then waited for an answer to his earlier question. "I don't know," Penelope sighed. "My girlfriend broke up with me in November. My company is downsizing, and Harry and Hamish have adopted a puppy." "Harry and Hamish?" "My brother and his husband. You remember, they got married last year, so that was the big news. And now they have a puppy!" Jason blinked. "Is that instead of a child, or—" Penelope laughed. "Maybe a precursor to a child?" Jason asked. "I don't think they're going to have a child." "Probably." Jason shrugged. "Too bad. Hey, that wine safe?" "Safe? For me? Not if you intend to drink it from my glass. I was just trying to ward off the horrors of last year. Jason liked making Penelope laugh. He'd always liked making Penelope laugh, even when he was a grumpy 11-year-old who didn't want to go to this stupid party. He'd seen Penelope across the room. She looked about 8 in her poofy dress and mini Doc Martens. As it turned out, she had actually been 13 and a late bloomer, but even then she'd struck him. Alternative. That was the word his father used. Jason thought it fit, even now when she wore her delicate evening gown that had one long sleeve on one beautiful almost bare shoulder, tantalizing pale skin, only crossed by a silver strap. Jason knew it was tailored to hide her bra. She'd talked about how awful it was to be a double G when she was 18, and Jason was a very pubescent 16-year-old. She hadn't meant anything by it. Penelope never meant anything by it. She was just casual. The way Jason's father said alternative made it sound like a bad thing, but when Jason saw Penelope, he thought the word with awe. She was some kind of mystical creature, if that wasn't a rude comparison. Jason wondered if he should stop second-guessing himself and make a move. After all, the worst that happened was he would be shot down, and Penelope would have a whole year to get over it before they would see each other again. But then Penelope had never shown any interest in him, and after telling him about her girlfriend dumping her, Jason wondered if she was gay, or something else. He wondered if he ever had a shot. They stayed together for most of the evening, venturing out every now and again to grab food or a pair of drinks, both steadfastly avoiding the parents. It was nearly midnight, around the time the party was supposed to end, when Jason decided to ask. "Pen," he said. She blinked at him. "You said you had a girlfriend this year." Yeah. A sadness crept into her eyes, and Jason could kick himself for causing that. "I didn't realize you liked women that way." Penelope shrugged. "Women, men, non-binary people, agender people. I'm not picky." Jason smiled at her casual attitude. His father hated it, called it all sorts of things like unprofessional, but Jason had always appreciated the ease with which she spoke, like she had no cares in the world. "Would you—" he trailed off. Pen pulled off her heels. Silver, like the strap, like her jewellery, like her fingernails. With her shoes off, Penelope's skirt was too long, and she hiked it up over one arm, showing off bare knees. "Aren't you supposed to wear tights or stockings or something?" Jason choked. "Tights are restrictive and horrible, stockings are too much effort, and only you, my mother, and the unfortunate waitstaff who are so not getting paid enough to clean up this mess are going to see that I'm not wearing them, so I decided not to." "Oh, and you just decide not to wear underpants because no one's going to see if you're wearing them or not too?" Jason snapped. "Not if I'm in a dress," Penelope smiled coyly. Jason wondered if it was on purpose. "Why the sudden interest in my undergarments?" "What? No, I'm not interested." "My mistake." Penelope smiled again and started making her way to the door to leave. "Bye, Mum," she called out. "Wait, Pen!" Jason called after her, jogging to keep up. Jogging in fancy leather shoes was never a good plan. He caught up to her right outside the door. "What's up?" she asked. "Do you want to share a taxi, or—" Jason looked up at the ceiling, desperately hoping for some kind of divine intervention, even if he didn't really believe in that sort of stuff. And there it was. Mistletoe. He let the smile spread on his face slowly as he looked back at Penelope. She was waiting impatiently. Jason leaned forward and kissed the girl he'd been crushing on since he was 11 in an ill-fitting tux. Penelope's lips were as soft as he was expecting them to be. Her hands were not. They tugged roughly at his hair, and he paused momentarily, checking the direction they were tugging in. Pen lightly bit his lip and pulled away. "What?" she asked. Jason gestured to the ceiling. "Mistletoe," he answered. "Oh, is that all?" Penelope rolled her eyes. "That, and I've been trying to ask you out for the past 5 years, Pen. You're too impatient and always leave before I get up my nerve, and then there was last year with the pole dancing, and the year before with my trip to A&E. Penelope held up a hand. "You're an idiot, and you have my phone number." Jason nodded. "I expect you to use it this time," Penelope instructed, and walked to get into her waiting taxi. If you enjoyed this, you can find more of my written work on nopoodles.wordpress.com. Check out the playlist for my other read-alouds, and if you want to support me, there's a link to my Ko-fi account in the description.